What is the Faust Tapes? Released in 1973 on Virgin Records, the Faust Tapes ranks easily as the most misunderstood of all Faust records. Recorded over 2 years, from June 1971 to June 1973, it was their first release for Virgin after Polydor felt the sales of So Far were not sufficient. Approaching Richard Branson to release music of Faust through Virgin, their manager Owen Ethelbank came with the genius of idea of starting things off with a cheap release. So while Faust 4 is the album they would go on to make especially for Virgin, they presented them with the Faust Tapes. For the Woomy experiment had continued long after the finishing of So Far, with record company release schedules being so slow and Moribund taking so while for the record to get released, marketed and then assessed. Things were carrying on in the Woomy studios, and they were carrying on in a very strange fashion. So, when the album came out in 1973, it was released for the price of a single, which in those days was 49 pence. Originally there was a suggestion of doing it for free, but Uwe said no, if you give it for free people think it's worthless, and he suggested the very, very next to nothing price of 49p. They weren't hiding behind their past. They decorated all the hostile reviews to their first album across the sleeve of that first Virgin release of the record. They didn't provide any track listing, and hardly surprising, as basically what the Faust Tapes is 26 tracks, the shortest of which is 20 seconds, spliced together. Now, in the modern CD age with track listings, you can tell when a changeover isn't, but sat at home the vinyl listener would be very hard pushed to spot exactly all of those changes, especially with most of the tracks being so short. So, what is the Faust Tapes? The album, it's a wildly schizophrenic beast. Now, when it came out, many of the record reviewers, especially in England, drew a very heavy connection between the music of Faust and Zappa, and while only a deaf man would not recognise that Faust had a Zappa influence, Faust were above all Faust, and nowhere more so than on the Faust Tapes. So the two previous albums were very different. The Clear album was that strange abstract sound collage, very discordant. The second album, So Far, really went for the guns. It really put songwriting into the music of Faust without compromising it one bit. The Faust Tape straddles those two. There's two very distinctive songs on there. Very distinctive, the J'aimais Odin and Flashback Caruso. Both are songs which you'll find in the playlist of live sets by Faust to this very day. But also, particularly the shorter tracks, lies an enormous variety of styles. Industrial noise, strange abstract honking saxophones, layered sound recordings, echoes and drums. It's a whirling kaleidoscope, it's a cut-up. It's almost like The Naked Lunch made music. It's hard to believe that they weren't inspired by the Burroughs idea of the cut and paste, the way all these tracks are glued together. The album was deleted fairly soon after. It was just there to generate publicity for what was going to happen next with Faust. 1980, Recommended Records re-released it, and then in 96, same label finally brought it out on CD. And then in 2001 came a definitive digital version, again from Recommended Records, excellently remastered to as good an audio quality as a CD can get, And this time it had a track list. We could this time see the 26 tracks, and in many cases their names, though there were plenty of untitles on there. If you're one of those people who doesn't have a record player, the 2001 issue is the one to get. Easy to spot, it's the only one of the track listing. So, what's the assessment? I mean, people once paid 49 pence for this, why should someone nowadays pay full price for it? Well, the short answer is, it's simply worth it. Now, Faust, of course, infamously always lumped in with the genre of krautrock, as they are been doing for the purposes of this database. But they stand so far apart from their contemporaries, partly because they lived in their own little bubble in Rumi, isolated from everything that was happening around them. Even so, the results, especially on the Faust tapes, are very, very bizarre. It's a kind of giddy, euphoric listen as you put this on. The audacity, the innovation, the chaos. Again, that's what makes it so strange that people overdid the Zappa link. The Zappa was a very organised, controlling, professional, sober-headed man. Faust embraced the chaos. They lived the lifestyle. They weren't control freaks. They were a unit. They weren't one man. They were many men, all pushing in different directions. It's hard to tell who's doing what. So many of the band members were multi-instrumentalists. The 2001 issue gives a few hints and credits to who did a bit of this, who did a bit of that. But for the most part, the mystery remains vivid and intact. And so does the sound. It's the twin to the Clear album, whereas So Far and Faust 4 are the most solidly song-based and psychedelic albums that Faust made. The Clear album and this are the wild rides, where the road maps get chucked out of the window, the driver accelerates with the headlights off. That's the effect. The Clear album was presented as being 3 different songs, but to most listeners sounded like a collection of many others. Here, especially with the 2001 issue, we have a guidebook now, thanks to the CD track listing, that tells us where the joins and the splices are. And somehow, it just makes you admire the skillful technical work that went behind the scenes of Faust's Rumi years even more. For Faust were a collective of musicians, but they were back with their technicians. Kurt Graupner, the engineer, was quite simply the finest engineer of his day. The sound recording work he did with Faust, no one in that era can touch it. Hardly anyone can even touch it these days. That Uwe, for his inspiration, his cheek, after letting it happen, making these impossible records happen, and staying with us down generations. So, it arrived in a mad, crazed fanfare, and no doubt upset a lot of people. You can't imagine your 70s hippies getting their teeth into this and mellowing out, because this is not a mellow album. There's buzz, there's fuzz, there's noise, there's discordance, and an absolute insanity that would turn most of them into a gibbering bad trip. Story has it that Jim Kerr of Simple Minds, upon obtaining his copy for 49p, threw it off the top of a block of flats in disgust and outrage. Which is ironic, because nowadays, you go into any charity shop, you can get one of his LPs for less than 49p, and you're even more likely to hurl it from a block of flats in disgust and outrage. But enough of the cheap shots of the musicians. The Faust tapes is a brilliant, insane, vivid testimony to the powers that came together to create the Faust phenomena, and nowhere do you find them more unchained and unhinged than on the Faust tapes. It's a sonic collage of derangement and an audio intoxicant. We sit here, or in my case walk here, decades after, and look back at the work done then in awe.